I'm right now on page 300. I'm reading the writings and essays from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Right now, reading from the book called Intellect. Please leave your thoughts, comments, and feedback. I look forward to hearing from you. And please let me know what you think about the ideas I'm sharing here. And let me know if my reading style resonates with you. I want to hear from you. I look forward to hearing from you. And please subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be ever so grateful. And please be so kind as to share a like or dislike button, as to press the like or dislike button. I want to hear what you think about my style of reading. I look forward to hearing from you. I'm going to carry on page 300 from this book called Intellect, written by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson was an amazing scholar, philosopher, whom many law of attractionists and self-help gurus have taken their insights from his amazing work and his amazing writings. Neither by detachment, neither by aggregation is the integrity of the intellect transmitted to its works, but by a vigilance which brings the intellect in its greatness and best state to operate every moment. I must have the same wholeness which nature has, although no diligence can rebuild the universe in a model. But the best accumulation or disposition of details, yet does the world reappear in miniature in every event, so that all the laws of nature may be read in the smallest fact. The intellect must have the like perfection in its apprehension and in its works. For this reason, an index or mercury of intellectual proficiency is the perception of identity. We talk with accomplished persons who appear to be strangers in nature. The cloud, the tree, the turf, the bird are not theirs, have nothing of them. The world is only their lodging and table, but the poet whose verses are to be spheral and complete is one whom nature cannot deceive. Whether face of strangeness, whatsoever face of strangeness she may put it. He feels a strict consanguinity and detects more likeness than variety in all her changes. We are stung by the desire for new thought, but when we receive a new thought, it is only the old thought with a new face. And though we make it our own, we instantly crave another. We are not really enriched, for the truth was in us before it was reflected to us from natural objects. And the profound genius will cast a likeness of all creatures into every product of his wit. But if the constructive powers are rare, and it is given to few men to be poets, yet if every man is a receiver of his descending Holy Ghost, and may well study the laws of its influx, exactly parallel is the whole rule of intellectual duty to the role of moral duty. Self-denial is no less astute than the saints is demanded. Of the scholar, he must worship truth and forego all things for that, and choose defeat and pain, so that his treasure is thought, so that his treasure in thought is thereby augmented. God offers to every mind its choice between truth and repose. Take which you please, you can never have both. Between these as a pendulum, man oscillates. He in whom the love of repose predominates will accept the first creed, the first philosophy, the first political party he meets, most likely his father's. He gets rest, commodity, and reputation. But he shuts the door of truth. He in whom the love of truth predominates will keep himself aloof from all moorings and afloat. He will abstain from dogmatism and recognize all the opposite negations between which, as walls, his being is swung. He submits to the inconceivable of suspense and imperfect opinion, but he is a candidate for truth, as the other is not, and respects the highest law of his being. The circle of the green earth he must measure with his shoes to find the man who can yield him truth. He shall then know that there is somewhat more blessed and great in hearing than in speaking. Happy is the hearing man, unhappy the speaking man. As long as I hear truth, I am bathed by a beautiful element, and I am conscious of any limits to my nature. The suggestions are thousandfold that I hear and see. The waters of the great deep have ingress and egress to the soul. But if I speak, I define, I confine, and bless. When Socrates speaks, Lysis and Menexenus are afflicted by no shame that they do not speak. They also are good. He likewise defers to them, loves them, whilst he speaks. Because a true and natural man contains and is the same truth which an eloquent man articulates, but in the eloquent man, because he can articulate, it seems something the less to reside, and he turns to the silent beautiful, with a more inclination and respect. The ancient sentence, "Let us be silent, for so the gods," silent is solvent, that destroys personality and gives us leave to be great and universal. Every man's progress is through a succession of teachers, each of whom seems at the time to have a superlative influence, but at last gives place to a new. Frankly, let him accept it all. Jesus said, "Leave father, mother, house, and lands, and follow me. Who leaves all receives more." This is as true intellectually as morally. Each new mind we approach seems to require an abdication of all our past and present possessions. A new doctrine seems at first a subversion of all our opinions, tastes, and manner of living, such as Swedenborg, such as Kant, such as Coleridge, such as Hegel, or his interpreter, cousin, seem to many young men in this country. Take thankfully and heartily all they can give. Exhaust them, wrestle with them, let them not go until the blessing be won. And after a short season, the dismay will be overpast, the excess of influence withdrawn, and they will be no longer an alarming mentor, but one more bright star shining serenely in your heaven and blending its light with all your day. But once he gives himself up unreservedly to that which draws him, because that is his own, he is to refuse himself to that which draws him not, whatsoever fame and authority may attend it, because it is not his own. Entire self-reliance belongs to the intellect. One's soul is a counterpoise of all souls, as a capillary column of water, as a balance for the sea. It must treat things and books in sovereign genius as itself, also a sovereign. If Aeschylus be that man, he is taken, for he has not yet done his office when he has educated the learned of Europe for 1,000 years. He is now to prove himself a master of delight to me also. If he cannot do that, all his fame shall avail him nothing with me. I were a fool not to sacrifice a thousand Aeschyluses to my intellectual integrity, especially take the time ground in regard to abstract truth, the science of the mind, the Bacon, the Spinoza, the Hume, Schelling, Kant, or whosoever propounds to you a philosophy of the mind, is only a more or less awkward translator of things in your consciousness, which you have also your way of seeing, perhaps of dominating. Say that instead of too timidly pouring into his obscure sense, that he has not succeeded in rendering back to your consciousness. He has not succeeded. Now let another try. If Plato cannot, perhaps Spinoza will. If Spinoza cannot, then perhaps Kant. Anyhow, when at last it is done, you'll find it is no recondite, but a simple natural common state which the writer restores to you. But let us end these dictates. I will not, though the subject might provoke it, speak to the open question between truth and love. I shall not presume to interfere in the old politics of the skies. Quote, the cherubim know most. The seraphim love most. End quote. The gods shall settle their own quarrels, but I cannot recite, even thus rudely, laws of intellect, without remembering that lofty and sequestered class who has been in its prophets and oracles, the high priesthood of the pure reason. The intrinsic Geiste, the expounders of the principles of thought from age to age, when at long intervals we turn over their abstruse pages, wonderful seems the calm and grand ear of these few, these great spiritual lords who have walked in the world. These are the old religion dwelling in a worship which makes the sanctions of Christianity look perverse and popular. For persuasion is in soul, but necessity, I'm going to repeat that with the quotes. For, quote, persuasion is in soul, but necessity is in intellect, end quote. The band of grandees, Hermes, Heraclitus, Empedocles, Plato, Plotinus, Alymphiodorus, Proclus, Cynisus, and the rest, has somewhat so vast in their logic, so primary in their thinking, that it seems antecedent to all the ordinary directions of rhetoric and literature, and to be at once poetry and music, and dancing and astronomy and mathematics. I am present at the sowing of the seed of the world. With a geometry of sunbeams, so lays the foundation of nature. The truth and grandeur of that thought is proved by its scope and applicability, for it commands the entire schedule and inventory of things for its illustration. But what makes its elevation and has even a comic look to us is the innocent serenity with which these babe-like Jupiters sit in their clouds, and fromage to each prattle to each other and to no contemporary, well assured that their speech is intelligible and the most natural thing in the world, they add thesis to thesis without a moment's heed. Of the universal astonishment of the human race below, who do not comprehend the plainest argument, do they ever relent so much as to insert a popular or explaining sentence, nor testify the least displeasure or petulance of the dullness of their maze auditory. The angels are so enamored of the language that is spoken in heaven that they will not distort their lips with the hissing and unmusical dialects of men, but speak their own, whether there be any who understand it or not. That's it. We finished this book on intellect, page 304. And now we're going on to the next book on art, which is on page 305. Art. Give to barrows, trays and pans, grace and glimmer of romance. Bring the moonlight into noon, hid in gleamy piles of stone. On the city's paved streets, plant gardens lined with lilac sweet. Let spouting fountains cool the ear, singing in the sun baked square. Let statue, picture, park and hall, build flag and festival. The past restore, the day adorn, and make each month, and make each month, and make each morrow a new morn. So shall the drudge in dusty frock spy behind the city clock. Retinues of eerie kings, skirts of angels, starry wings. I'm not sure they might go. You may need to read this horizontally. I'm not really sure. Let me see. Let's check. Let's attempt to read this horizontally. Gift to borrows, trays and pens, retinues of eerie kings, grace and glimmer of romance, skirts of angels, starry wings. Bring the moonlight into noon, his father shining in bright fables. Hid in gleaming piles of stone, his children fed at heavenly tables. No, I don't think it's supposed to be read that way. I'm reading that incorrectly. I'm going to start again. Art, gift to barrows, trays and pans, grace and glimmer of romance. Bring the moonlight into noon, hidden gleaming piles of stone. On the city's paved street, plant gardens lined with lilac sweet. Let spouting fountains cool the ear, singing in the sun bake square. Let statue, picture park and hall, ballad flag and festival. The past restore and day adorn, and make each morrow a new morn. So shall the drudge in dusty frock spy behind the city clock. Retinues of eerie kings, skirts of angels, starry wings. His father shining in bright fables, his children fed at heavenly tables. 'Tis the privilege of art, thus to pay its cheerful part. Man is earth to acclimate, and bend the exile to his fate, and moulded of one element with the days and firmament. Teach him on these as stairs to climb, and live on even terms with time, whilst upper life, the slender rill of human sense both overfill. Because the soul is progressive, and it never quite repeats itself, but in every act attempts the production of a new fairer whole. This appears in works both of the useful and fine arts. If we employ the popular distinction of works according to their aim, either at use or beauty, thus in our fine arts, not imitation, but creation is the aim. In landscapes, the painter should give the suggestion of a fairer creation than we know. The details, the prose of nature, he should omit and give us only the spirit and splendor. He should know that the landscape has beauty for his eye, because it expresses a thought which is to him good. And this because the same power which sees through his eyes is seen in that spectacle, and he will come to value the expression of nature and not nature itself. I'll repeat that. And he will come to value the expression of nature and not nature itself, and so exalt in his copy the features that please him. He will give the gloom of gloom and the sunshine of sunshine. In a portrait he must inscribe the character and not the features. He must esteem the man who sits to him as himself only and a perfect picture of likeness of the aspiring original within. What is that abridgment and selection we observe in all spiritual activity, but itself the creative impulse? For it is the inlet of that higher illumination which teaches to convey a larger sense by simpler symbols. What is a man? but nature's finer success in explication. What is a man but a finer and compacter landscape from the horizon figures nature's electricism? And what is his speech? His love of painting, love of nature, but a still finer success, all the weary miles and tons of space and bulk left out, and the spirit or moral of it contracted into a musical word, or the most cunning stroke of the pencil. But the artist must employ the symbol in use in his day and nation to convey his large sense to his fellow men. Thus the new in art is always formed out of the old. The genius of the hour sets his ineffaceable seal on the work and gives it an impressionable charm for the imagination. As far as the spiritual character of a period overpowers the artist and finds expression in his work, so far it will retain a certain grandeur and will represent to future beholders the unknown, the inevitable, the divine. No man can quite exclude his element of necessity from his labor. No man can quite emancipate himself from his age and country, or produce a model in which the education, the religion, the politics, usages, and arts of his times shall have no share, though he were never so original, never so willful and fantastic. He cannot wipe out his work every trace of the thoughts amidst which it grew. The very avoidance betrays the usage he avoids above his will. And out of his sight he is necessitated by the air he breathes and the idea in which he and his contemporaries live and toil, to share the manner of his times without knowing what the manner is. Now that which is inevitable in the work has a higher charm than individual talent can ever give, inasmuch as the artist's pen or chisel seems to have been held and guided by a gigantic hand to inscribe a line in the history of the human race. The circumstances gives a value to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, to the Indian, Chinese, and Mexican idols, however gross and shapeless. They denote the height of the human soul in that hour, and were not fantastic, but sprung from a necessity as deep as the world. Shall I now add that the whole extant product of the plastic arts has herein its highest value as history. As a stroke drawn in the portrait of that fate, perfect and beautiful, according to whose ordinations all beings advance to their beatitude. Thus historically viewed, it has been the office of art to educate the perception of beauty. We are immersed in beauty, but our eyes have no clear vision. It needs by the exhibition of the single artist, single traits, to assist and lead the dormant tastes. We carve and paint, or we behold what is carved and painted. As students of the mystery of form, the virtue of art lies in detachment and sequestering one object from the embarrassing variety, until one thing comes out from the connection of things. They can be enjoyment, contemplation, but no thoughts. Our happiness and unhappiness are unproductive. Infant lies in a pleasing trance, but his individual character and his practical power depend on his daily progress in the separation of things and dealing with one at a time. Love and all the passions concentrate all existence around a single form. It is the habit of certain minds to give an all-excluding fullness to the object, the thought, the word they alight upon, and to make that for the time the deputy of the world. These are the artists, the orators, the leaders of society. The power to detach and to magnify by detaching is the essence of rhetoric in the hands of the orator and the poet. This rhetoric, or power to fix the momentary eminency of an object, so remarkable in Brooke, in Byron, in Carlyle, the painter and sculptor, exhibit in color and in stone. The power depends on the depth of the artist's insight of that object he contemplates, for every object has its roots in central nature, and may of course be so exhibited to us as to represent the world. Therefore, each work of genius is the tyrant of the hour, concentrates attention on itself. For the time, it is the only thing worth naming to do. That be it a sonnet, an opera, a landscape, a statue, an oration, the plan of a temple, or a campaign, or of a voyage of discovery. Presently we pass to some other object which rounds itself into a whole, as did the first. For example, a well-laid garden, and nothing seems worth doing but the laying out of gardens. I should think fire the best thing in the world, if I were not acquaintance with air and water and earth. For it is the right and property of all natural objects, of all genuine talents, of all native properties whatsoever, to be, their moment, the top of the world. A squirrel leaping from bough to bough, and making the wood one wide tree for his pleasure, fills the eye not less than a lion is beautiful. Self-sufficing it stands then and there for nature. A good ballad draws my ear and heart, whilst I listen as much as an epic has done before. A dog drawn by a master, or a litter of pigs, satisfies and is a reality not less than the ferocious of Angelo. Frescoes of Angelo. From this succession of excellent objects, we learn at last the immensity of the world, the opulence of human nature, which can run out into the infinitude in any direction. But I also learn that what astonished and fascinated me in the first work astonished me in the second work also. That excellence of all things is one. The office of painting and sculpture seems to be merely initial. The best pictures can easily tell us that last secret. The best pictures are rude draughts of a few of the miraculous dots and lines and dyes which make up the ever-changing landscape with figures amidst which we dwell. Painting seems to be to the eye what dancing is to the limbs. When that has educated the frame to self-possession, to nimbleness, to grace, the steps of dancing master are better forgotten. So painting teaches me the splendor of color and expression of form. And as I see many pictures and higher genius in the art, I see the boundless opulence of the pencil, the indifferency which artist stands free to choose out of possible forms. If he can draw everything, why draw anything? And then is my eye opened to the eternal picture which nature paints in the street with moving men and children, beggars and fine ladies draped in red and green and blue and grey, long-haired, grizzled, white-faced, black-faced, wrinkled, giant, dwarf, expanded, elfish, capped, and based by heaven, earth, and sea. A gallery of sculpture teaches more austerely the same lesson. As picture teaches the coloring, so sculpture the anatomy of form. When I have seen the fine statues and afterwards enter a public assembly, I understand well what he meant who said, quote, "When I have been reading Homer, all men look like giants, End quote. I too see that painting and sculpture are gymnastics of the eye. It's training to the niceties and curiosities of its function. There is no statue like this living man, with his infinite advantage or all ideal sculpture of perpetual variety. What a gallery of art have I here! No mannerist made these varied groups and diverse original single figures. Here is the artist himself, improvising, grim and glad at his block. Now one thought strikes him, now another, and with each moment he alters the whole air, attitude, and expression of his clay. Away with your nonsense of oil and easels, or of marble and chisels, except to open your eyes to the masteries of eternal art. They are, by hypocritical rubbish, the reference of all production at last to an aboriginal power explains the traits common to all works of the highest art, that they are universally intelligible, that they restore to us the simplest states of mind, and are religious. Since what skill is therein shown in the reappearance of the original soul, a jet of pure light, it should produce a similar impression to that made by natural objects. In happy hours, nature appears to us one with art. Art perfected, the work of genius, an individual in whom simple tastes and susceptibility to all the great human influences overpower the accents of a local and special culture, is the best critic of art. Though we travel the world over to find the beautiful, we must carry it with us, or we find it not. The best of beauty is a finer charm than skill in surfaces. In outlines or rules of art can ever teach, namely a radiation from the work of art. Of human character, a wonderful expression through stone or canvas, a musical sound of the deepest and simplest attributes of our nature, and therefore most intelligible at last to the souls which have these attributes, in the sculptures of the Greeks, in the masonry of the Romans, and the pictures of the Tuscan and Venetian masters. The highest charm is the universal language they speak, a confession of moral nature, of purity, love, and hope. Breathes from them all that which we carry to them. The same we bring back more freely illustrated in the memory. The traveler who visits the Vatican and passes from chamber to chamber, through galleries of statues, vases, sarcophagi, and candelabra, through all forms of beauty, cut in the richest materials, is in danger of forgetting the simplicity of the principles out of which they all sprang, and that they had their origin from thought and laws in his own breast. He studies the technical rules on these wonderful remains, but forgets that these works were not always thus constellated, that they are the contributions of many ages and many countries. They each came out of the solitary workshop of one artist, who toiled perhaps in ignorance of the existence of other sculpture, created his work without other models save life, household life, and the sweet and smart of personal relations, of beating hearts and beating eyes, of poverty and necessity, and hope and fear. These were his inspirations, and these are the effects he carries home to your heart and mind. In proportion to his force, the artist will find in his work an outlet for his proper character. He must not be in any manner pinched or hindered by his material, but through his necessity of imparting himself, the adamant will be wax in his hands. In his hands or in his bands? Either one is good. And will allow an adequate communication of himself in his full stature and proportion. He need not cumber himself with a conventional nature and culture, nor ask what is the mode in Rome or in Paris, but the house and weather and manner of living, which poverty and the fate of birth have made at once so odious and so dear, in the grey unpainted wood cabin on the corner of a New Hampshire farm, or in the log hut of the backwoods, or in the narrow lodging where he has endured the constraints and seeming of a city poverty, will serve as well as any other condition as a symbol of a thought which pours itself indifferently through all. I remember when in my younger days I heard of the wonders of Italian painting. I fancied that great pictures would be great strangers. Some surprising combination of color and form, a foreign wonder, barbaric pearl and gold, like the spontoons and standards of the militia, which play such pranks in the eyes and imaginations of schoolboys. I was to see and acquire, I knew not what. When I came at last to Rome and saw with the eyes the pictures, I found that genius left to novices, the gay and fantastic, ostentatious, and itself pierced directly to the simple and true. That I was familiar and sincere, that I was the old, eternal fact I had met already in so many forms, unto which I lived, that I was the plain you and me I knew so well, had left at home in so many conversations. I had had the same experiences already in a church at Naples. There I saw that nothing has changed with me but the place, and said to myself, "Thou foolish child." I'll put that in quotation marks. I'll read it again. There I saw that nothing was changed with me but the place, and said to myself, quote, "Thou foolish child, hast thou come out hither over 1,000 miles of salt water to find that which was perfect to thee there at home?" End quote. That fact I saw again in the Academia at Naples, in the chambers of sculpture, and yet again when I came to Rome and to the paintings of Raphael, Angelo, Sakai, Titian, and Leonardo da Vinci. Quote, "What old model workest thou in the earth so fast?" End quote. It had travelled by my side. That which I fancied I had left in Boston was here in the Vatican, and again at Milan and at Paris. I made all travelling ridiculous as a treadmill. I now require this of all pictures, that they domesticate me, not that they dazzle me. Pictures must not be too picturesque. Nothing astonishes men so much as common sense and plain dealing. All great actions have been simple, and all great pictures are. The Transfiguration by Raphael is an eminent example of this peculiar merit. A calm, benignant beauty shines over all this picture and goes directly to the heart. It seems almost to call you by name. The sweet and sublime face of Jesus is beyond praise, yet how it disappoints all florid expectations. This familiar, simple, home-speaking countenance is as if one should meet a friend. The knowledge of picture dealers has its value, but listen not to their criticism. When your heart is touched by genius, it was not painted for them, it was painted for you, for such as had eyes capable of being touched by simplicity and lofty emotions. Yet, when we have said all our fine things about the arts, we must end with a frank confession that the arts, as we know them, are but initial. Our best praise is given to what they aimed and promised, not to the actual result. He has conceived meanly of the resources of man, who believes that the best age of production is past. The real values of the Iliad or Transfiguration is as signs of power, billows or ripples. They are of the stream of tendency, tokens of the everlasting effort to produce, which even in its worst estate, the soul betrays. Art has not yet come to its maturity if it do not put itself abreast with the most potent influences of the world. If it is not practical and moral, if it do not stand in connection with the conscience, if it do not make the poor and uncultivated feel that it addresses them with a voice of lofty cheer. There's higher work for art than the arts. They are abortive births of an imperfect, vitiated instinct. Art is the need to create, but its essence, immense and universal, is impatient of working with lame or tied hands, and of making cripples and monsters, such as all pictures and statues are, nothing less than the creation of man, and nature is its end. And man should find in it an outlet for his whole energy. He may paint and carve only, as long as he can do that. Art should exhilarate and throw down the walls of circumstance on every side, awakening in the beholder the same sense of universal relation and power which the work evinced in the artist, and its highest effect is to make new artists. Already history is old enough to witness the old age. Already history is old enough to witness the old age and disappearance of particular arts. The art of sculpture is long ago perished to any real effect. It was originally a useful art, a mode of writing, a savage's record of gratitude or devotion, and among a peoples possessed of a wonderful perception of form. This childish carving was refined to the utmost splendor of effect. But it is the game of a rude and youthful people, and not the manly labor of a wise and spiritual nation. Under an oak tree loaded with leaves and nuts, under a sky full of eternal eyes, I stand in a thorough fear, but in the works of our plastic arts, and especially of sculpture, creation is driven into a corner. I cannot hide from myself that there is a certain appearance of paltriness, as of toys and the trumpetry, as of toys and the trumpery of a theater and sculpture. Nature transcends all our moods of thought, and its secret we do not yet find. But the gallery stands at the mercy of our moods, and there is a moment when it becomes frivolous. I do not wonder that Newton, with an attention habitually engaged on the paths of planets and suns, should have wondered what the Earl of Pembroke found to admire in stone dolls. Sculpture may serve to teach the pupil how deep is the secret of form, how purely the spirit can translate its meanings into that eloquent dialect. But the statue will look cold and false before that new activity which needs to roil through all things and is impatient of counterfeits and things not alive. Picture and sculpture are the celebrations and festivities of form, but true art is never fixed but always flowing. The sweetest music is not in the oratorio, but in the human voice, when it speaks from its instant life, tones of tenderness, truth, of courage. The Ontario has already lost its relation to the morning, to the sun, and the earth, but that persuading voice is in tune with these. All works of art should not be detached, but extempore performance. A great man is a new statue in every attitude and action. A great man is a new statue in every attitude and action. A beautiful woman is a picture which drives all beholders nobly mad. Life may be lyric or epic, as well as a poem or a romance. A true announcement of the law of creation. If a man were found worthy to declare it, would carry art up into the kingdom of nature and destroy its separate and contrasted existence. The fountains of invention and beauty in modern society are all but dried up. A popular novel, a theater, or a ballroom makes us feel that we are all paupers in the almshouse of this world. Without dignity, without skill or industry, art is as poor and low, the old tragic necessity which lowers on the brows even of the Venuses and the Cupids, of the antique, and furnishes the sole apology for the intrusion of such anomalous figures into nature, namely that they were inevitable, that the artist was drunk with a passion for form which he could not resist, and which vented itself in these fine extravagances. No longer dignifies no longer dignifies the chisel or the pencil, but the artist and the connoisseur now seek in art the exhibition of their talent, or an asylum from the evils of life. Men are not well past with the figure they make in their own imaginations, and they flee to art and convey their better sense in an oratorio, a statue, or a picture. Art makes the same effort with essential prosperity, which essential prosperity makes, namely to detach the beautiful from the useful, to do up the work as unavoidable, and hating it, pass on to enjoyment. These solaces and compensations, this division of beauty from use, the laws of nature do not permit. Soon as beauty is sought, not from religion and love, but for pleasure, it degrades the seeker. High beauty is no longer attainable by him in canvas or in stone, in sound or in lyrical construction. An effeminate, prudent, sickly beauty which is not beauty is all that can be formed. For the hand can never execute anything higher than the character can inspire. The art that thus separates is itself first separated. Art must not be a superficial talent, but must be farther back in man. Now men do not see nature to be beautiful, and they go to make a statue which shall be. They abhor men as tasteless, dull, and inconvertible, and console themselves with color bags and blocks of marble. They reject life as prosaic and create a death which they call poetic. They dispatch the day's weary chores and fly to voluptuous reveries. They eat and drink, and they may afterwards execute the ideal. Thus is art vilified. The name conveys to the mind its secondary and bad senses. It strands in the imagination as somewhat contrary to nature and struck with death from the first. Would it not be better to begin higher up to serve the ideal before they eat and drink? To serve the ideal in eating and drinking, enjoying the breath and the functions of life. Beauty must come back to the useful arts and the distinction between the fine and the useful arts. I'll repeat that. Beauty must come back to the useful arts, and the distinction between the fine and the useful arts be forgotten. If history were truly told, if life were nobly spent, it would be no longer easy or possible to distinguish the one from the other. In nature, all is useful, all is beautiful. It is therefore beautiful because it is alive, moving, reproductive. It is therefore useful because it is symmetrical and fair. Beauty will not come at the call of a legislator, nor will it repeat in England or America its history in Greece. It will come as always, unannounced, and spring up between the feet of brave and earnest men. It is vain that we look for genius to reiterate its miracles. In the old arts, it is instinct to find beauty and holiness in new and necessary facts. I'm going to repeat that again so we get it right. It is vain that we look for genius to reiterate its miracles in the old arts. It is its instinct to find beauty and holiness, its new and its necessary facts, in the field and roadside, in the shop and mill, proceeding from a religious heart, raised to a divine use, the railroad, the insurance office, the joint stock company, our law, our primary assemblies of commerce, the galvanic battery, the electric jar, the prism, and the chemistry's retort, in which we seek. And the chemistry retort in which we seek now only an economical use is not the selfish and yet cruel aspect which belongs to our great mechanical works, to mills, railways, and machinery, the effect of the mercenary impulses which these works obey. When its errands are noble and adequate, a steamboat bridging the Atlantic between Old and New England and arriving at its ports with the punctuality of a planet is a step of man into harmony with nature. The boat of St. Petersburg, which plies along with Lena by magnetism, needs little to make it sublime. When science is learned in love, and its powers are wielded by love, they will appear the supplements and continuations of the material creation. We are currently page 315. On the computer, it's coming out as page 309. But that's okay, the 6 pages behind. 315, we have now finished this book. The name of this book was called Art. That was on art. Let's see what comes now. Essays. What page is this? Well, I'm going to assume that we are currently on page... Doesn't say the name of the page. Okay. Second series. I mean, we could go by the computer, which says that we are currently on page 310. So we'll put it at that. 310 or 316, whichever. Essays, second series. The second book of essays was published in 1844, and soon afterward, also in England. The essays had been used in various forms before various publics as lectures, and were completely rewritten for use in the book. This book was better received than its predecessors. Let's have a look. The poet, a moody child and wildly wise, pursued the game with joyful eyes, which chose like meteors their way, and rived the dark with private ray. They overleaped the horizon edge, searched with Apollo's privilege, through man and woman and sea and star, saw the dance of nature forward far, through worlds and races and terms and times, saw musical order and peering rhymes, Olympian bards who sung divine ideas below, which always find us young and always keep us so. Those who are esteemed umpires of taste, and often persons who have acquired some knowledge of admired pictures, sculptures, and have an inclination for whatever is elegant. But if you inquire whether they are beautiful souls, and whether their own acts are like fear pictures, you learn that they are selfish and sensual. That cultivation is local, as if you should rub a log of dirty wood. I beg your pardon. That cultivation is local, and if you should rub a log of dry wood in one spot to produce fire, all the rest remaining cold, their knowledge in the fine arts and some study of rules and particulars, or some limited judgment of color or form which is exercised for amusement or for show. It is a proof of the shallowness of the doctrine of beauty as it lies in the minds of our amateurs. That men seem to have lost the perception of the instant independence of form upon soul. There is no doctrine of forms in our philosophy. We will put into our bodies as fire is put into a pan to be carried about. But there is no accurate adjustment between the spirit and the organ, much less is the latter the germination of the former. So in regard to other forms, intellectual men do not believe in any essential dependence of the material world on thought and volition. Theologians think it a pretty air castle to talk of the spiritual meaning of a ship or cloud and a city or a contract, but they prefer to come again to the solid ground of historical evidence. And even the poets are contented with a civil and conformed manner of living, and to write poems from the fancy at a safe distance from their own experience. But the highest mind of the world have never ceased to explore the double meaning, or shall I say, the quadruple or the centuple, or much more manifold meaning of every sensuous fact. Orpheus, Empedocles, Hercules, Plato, Plutarch, Dante, Swedenborg, and the master of sculpture, picture and poetry, for we are not pans and barrows, nor even porters of the fire and torch bearers, till children of the fire, made of it, and only the same divinity transmutes it, and at 2 or 3 removes, when we know least about it. And this hidden truth, at the fountains whence all this river of time and its creatures floweth, are intrinsically ideal and beautiful, draws us to the consideration of the nature and function of the poet, or the man of beauty, to the means and material he uses, and to the general aspect of the art in the present time. The breadth of the problem is great, for the poet is representative. He stands among partial men for the complete man, and apprises us not of his wealth, but of the commonwealth. The young man reveres men of genius, because, to speak truly, they are more himself than he is. They receive of the soul as he also receives. But they more. Nature enhances her beauty to the eye of loving men, from the belief that the poet is beholding her shows at the same time. He is isolated among his contemporaries. By truth and by his art, but with his consolation and in his pursuits that they will draw all men sooner or later. For all men live by truth and stand in need of expression in love, in art, in avarice, in politics, in labor, in games. We study to utter our painful secrets. The man is only himself. The man is only half himself. The other half is his expression. Notwithstanding this necessity to be published, adequate expression is rare. I know that how it is that we need an interpreter. But the great majority of men seem to be minors, who have not yet come into the possession of their own, or mutes, who cannot report the conversation they have had with nature. There is no man who does not anticipate a supersensual utility in the sun and stars, earth and water. They stand and wait to render him a peculiar service. But there is some obstruction or some excess of feeling in our constitution which does not suffer them to yield the due effect. Too feeble for the impressions of nature on us to make us artists. Every touch should thrill. Every man should be so much an artist that he could report in conversation what had befallen him. Yet, in our experiences, the rays or pulsars have sufficient force. The rays or pulses have sufficient force to arrive at the senses, but not enough to reach the quick and compelled reproduction of themselves in speech. The poet is a person in whom these powers are in balance. The man without impediment, who sees and handles that which others dream of, traverses the whole scale of experience, and is representative of man, in virtue of being the largest power to receive and to impart. The universe has three children, born at one time, which reappear under different names in every system of thought, whether they be called cause, operation, and effect, or more poetically, Jove, Pluto, Neptune, or theologically, the Father, the Spirit, and the Son, but which we will call here the knower, the doer, and the there. These stand, respectively, for the love of truth, for the love of good, and for the love of beauty. These three are equal. Each is that which he is, essentially so that he cannot be surmounted or analyzed. And each of these three has the power of the others latent in him and his own patent. The poet is the sayer, the namer, and represents beauty. He is a sovereign and stands on the center. For the world is not painted or adorned, but is from the beginning beautiful. And God has not made some beautiful things, but beauty is the creator of the universe. Therefore, the poet is not any permissive potentate, but is emperor in his own right. Criticism is infested with a cant of materialism, which assumes the manual skill and activity is the first merit of all men, and disparages such as say and do not, overlooking the fact that some men, namely poets, are natural sayers, sent into the world to the end of expression, and confounds them with those whose province is action, but acquits it to imitate the sayers. But Homer's words are as costly and admirable to Homer as Agamemnon's victories are to Agamemnon. The poet does not wait for the hero or the sage, but as they act and think primarily, so he writes primarily, that will and must be spoken, reckoning the others, though primary also, yet in respect to him, secondaries and servants, as sitters or models in the studio of a painter, or as assistants who bring building materials to an architect. For poetry was all written before time was. And whenever we are so formed, organize, I beg your pardon, we've jumped ahead. We'll go back 3 lines above in the previous paragraph. Yet in respect to him, secondaries and servants as sitters and models in the studio of a painter, or as assistants who bring building materials to an architect. For poetry was all written before time was. And whenever we are so finely organized that we can penetrate into that region where the ear is music, we hear those primal warblings and attempt to write them down, but we lose ever and anon a word or a verse and substitute something of our own and thus miswrite the poem. The men of more delicate ear write down these cadences more faithfully, and these transcripts, though imperfect, become the songs of the nations. For nature is as truly beautiful as it is good, or as it is reasonable, and must as much appear as it must be done or be known. Words and deeds are quite indifferent modes of the divine energy. Words are also actions, and actions are a kind of words. The signs and credentials of the poet or that he announces that which no man foretold. He is a true and only doctor. He knows and tells. He is the only teller for news, for he was present and privy to the appearance which he describes. He is a beholder of ideas, and an utterer of the necessary and casual. For we do not speak now of men, of potential talents, or of industry and skill in meter, but of the true poet. I took part in a conversation the other day concerning a recent writer of lyrics, a man of subtle mind, who had appeared to be a music box of delicate tunes and rhythms, and whose skill and command of language we could not sufficiently praise. But when the question arose whether he was not only a lyrist, but a poet, we are obliged to confess that he is plainly a contemporary, not an eternal man. He does not stand out of our low limitations like a chimborazo under the line running up from a tour base through all the climates of the globe, with belts of the herbage of every latitude on its high and muddled sides. But this genius is the landscape garden of a modern house adorned with fountains and statues, which well-bred men and women, standing and sitting in the walks and terraces, we hear through all the varied music, the ground tone of conventional life. Our poets are men of talents who sing, and not the children of music. The argument is secondary. The finish of the verses is primary. I'm going to repeat that. Our poets are men of talents who sing, and not the children of music. The argument is secondary. The finish of the verses is primary. For it is not meters, but a meter taking, for it is not meters, but a meter making argument that makes a poem. A thought so passionate and alive that, like the spirit of a plant or an animal, it has an architecture of its own and adorns nature with a new thing. The thought and the form are equal in the order of time, but in the order of Genesis, the thought is prior to the form. The poet has a new thought. He has a whole new experience to unfold. He will tell us how it was with him, and all men will be the richer in his fortune. For the experience of each new age requires a new confession, and the world seems always waiting for its poet. I remember when I was young, how much I was moved one morning by tidings that genius had appeared in a youth who sat near me at a table. He had left his work and gone rambling none knew whither, and had written hundreds of lines, but could not tell whether that which was him was therein told. He could tell nothing but that all was changed. Man, beast, heaven, earth, and sea. How gladly we listened, how credulous. Society seemed to be compromised. We sat in the aura of a sunrise, which was to put out all the stars. Boston seemed to be at twice the distance it had the night before. It was much farther than that. Rome? What was Rome? Plutarch and Shakespeare were in the yellow leaf, and Homer no more shall be heard of. It is much to know what that poetry has been written this very day, under this very roof by your side. What that wonderful spirit has not expired. The stony moments are still sparkling and animated. I had fancied that the oracles were all silent, and nature had spent her fires, and behold, all night from every pore these fine auras have been streaming. Everyone has some interest in the advent of the poet, and no one knows how much it may concern him. We know that the secret of the world is profound. But who or what shall be our interpreter? We know not. A mountain ramble, a new style of face, a new person may put the key into our hands. Of course, the value of genius to us is in the veracity of its report. Talents may frolic and juggle. Genius realizes and adds, mankind in good earnest have availed so far in understanding themselves and their work, that the foremost watchman on the peak announces his news. It is the truest word ever spoken, and the phrase will be the fittest, most musical, and the unerring voice of the world for that time. All that we call sacred history. All that we call sacred history attests that the birth of a poet as a principal event in chronology. Let me repeat that. All that we call sacred history attests that the birth of a poet as a principal event in chronology. Man, never so often deceived, still watches for the arrival of a brother who can hold him steady to a truth until he has made it his own. With what joy I begin to read a poem which I confide is an inspiration, and now my chains ought to be broken. I shall mount above these clouds and opaque airs in which I live, opaque though they seem transparent, and from the heaven of truth I shall see and comprehend my relations that will reconcile me to life and renovate nature, to see trifles animated by a tendency and to know what I am doing. Life will no more be noise, nor shall I see men and women and know the signs by which they may be discerned from fools and satans. This day shall be better than my birthday. Then I became an animal. Now I am invited into the science of the real. Such is the hope, but the fruition is postponed. Oftener it falls that the winged man who will carry me into the heaven whirls me into mists, that leaps and frisks about with me as it were from cloud to cloud, still affirming that he is bound heavenward, and I, being myself a novice, am slow in perceiving that he does not know the way into the heavens, and is merely bent that I should admire his skill to rise like a fowl or a flying fish, a little way from the ground on the water, but the all-piercing, all-feeding, and ocular ear of heaven that man shall never inhabit. I tumble down again soon into my old nooks and lead the life of exaggerations as before, and have lost my faith in the possibility of any guide who can lead me thither where I would be. But leaving these victims of vanity, let us with new hope observe how nature, by worthier impulses, has ensured the poet's fidelity to his office of announcement, and affirming namely by the beauty of things, which becomes a new and higher beauty when expressed. Nature offers all her creatures to him as picture language, being used as a type. Second wonderful value appears in the subject, far better than its old value. As a carpenter's stretch cord, if you hold your ear close enough, is musical in the breeze. Quote, things more excellent than every image. End quote. Said Jamblichus, quote, are expressed through images, end quote. Things admit of being used as symbols before nature is a symbol, in the whole and in every part. Every line we can draw in the sand has expression, and there is no body without its spirit or genius. All form is an effect of character, or condition of the quality of the life all harmony, of health, and for this reason, a perception of beauty should be sympathetic or proper only to the good. The beautiful rests of the foundation of the necessary. The soul makes the body, as the wise Spencer teaches. Quote, so every spirit, as it is more pure, and hath in it the more of heavenly light, so it, the purer body, doth procure to habit it, and it more freely dight, with cheerful grace and amiable sight. For the soul, the body form doth take, for form is form, and doth the body make. End quote. Here we find ourselves suddenly not in a critical speculation, but in a holy place, and should go very warily and reverently. We stand before the secret of the world. There were being passes into appearance and unity into variety. The universe is the externalization of the soul. Wherever the life is, that bursts into appearance around it. Our science is sensual and therefore superficial. The earth and the heavenly bodies, physics and chemistry, we sensually treat as if they were self-existent. But these are the retinue of that being we have. Quote, the mighty heaven, end quote, said Proclus, exhibits in its transfigurations clear images of the splendor of intellectual perceptions, being moved in conjunction with the unapparent period of intellectual natures. End quote. Therefore, science always goes abreast with the just elevation of the man, keeping step with religion and metaphysics. All the state of science is an index of our self-knowledge, since everything in nature answers to a moral power. If any phenomenon remains brute and dark, it is because the correct corresponding faculty in the observer is not yet active. No wonder then, if these waters be so deep that we hover over them with a religious regard, the beauty of the fable proves the importance of the sense to the poet and to all others. Or if you please, every man insofar as a poet, as to be susceptible of these enchantments of nature. For all men have the thoughts whereof the universe is the celebration. Find that the fascination resides in the symbol who loves nature. Who does not? Is it only poets and men of leisure and cultivation who live with her? No. But also hunters, farmers, grooms, and butchers. Though they express their affection in their choice of life and not in the choice of words. The writer wonders what the coachman or the hunter values in riding, in horses and dogs. It is not superficial qualities when you talk with him. He holds these as a slight, a rate, as his worship is sympathetic. He has no definitions, but he is commanded in nature by the living power which he feels to be there, present. No imitation or playing of these things would content him. He loves the earnest of the north wind, of rain, of stone and wood and iron. A beauty not explicable is dearer than a beauty which we can see to the end of. It is the nature, the symbol, the nature certifying the supernatural body overflowed by life, which he worships with coarse but sincere rites. The inwards and mystery of this attachment drive men of every class to the use of emblems. The school of poets and philosophers are not more intoxicated with their symbols than the populace with theirs. And now political parties compute the badges and emblems, see the great ball which they roll from Baltimore to Bunker Hill, and the political processions. Lowell goes in a loom, Lowell goes in a loom, and Lynn in a shoe, and Salem in a ship. Witness the cider barrel, the log cabin, the hickory stick, the palmetto, and all the cognizances of the party. See the power of national emblems, some stars, lilies, leopards, a crescent, a lion, an eagle, or other figures which came into credit, God knows how, or an old rag of blunting blowing in the wind, or on the wind on a fort at the end of the earth, shall make the blood tingle under the rudest of the most conventional exterior. People fancy they hate poetry, and they are all poets and mystics. Beyond this universality of the symbolic language, we are apprised of the divineness of the superior use of things, whereby the world is a temple whose walls are covered with emblems, pictures, and commandments of the deity. In this, that there is no fact in nature which does not carry the whole sense of nature, and the distinctions which we make in events and interferers of low and high, honest and base, disappear when nature is used as a symbol. Thought makes everything fit for use. The vocabulary of an omniscient man would embrace words and images excluded from polite conversation. What would be base or even obscene? To the obscene becomes illustrious. Spoken in a new connection of thought. The piety of the Hebrew prophets purges the grossness. The circumcision is an example of the power of poverty to raise the low and offensive. I'm just going to read that again. The circumcision is an example of the power of poetry to raise the low and offensive. Small and mean things serve as well as great symbols. The meaning of the type by which a law is expressed, the more pungent it is, and the more lasting in the memories of men. Just as we chose a small box or case in which any needful utensil can be carried, be lists of words are found suggestive to an imaginative and excited mind, as it is related of Lord Chatham, that he was accustomed to read in Bailey's dictionary when he was preparing to speak in Parliament. The poorest experience is rich enough for all the purpose of expressing thought. Why coveting knowledge of new facts? Day and night, house and garden, a few books, a few actions, serve us as well as with all trades and all spectacles. We are far from having exhausted the significance of the few symbols we use. We can come to use them yet with a terrible simplicity. It does not need that a poem should be long. Every word was once a poem. Every new relation is a new word. Also, just repeat that. Every word was once a poem. Every new relation is a new word. Also, we use defects and deformities to a sacred purpose. So, expressing our sense that the evils of the world are such only to the evil eye. In the old mythology, mythologists observe defects are ascribed as lameness. I cannot say the word, it's not there, so I have to skip it. As lameness to Vulcan, blindness to Cupid, and the like, to signify exuberances. For as it is dislocation and detachment from the life of God that makes things ugly, the poet who reattaches things to nature and the whole, reattaching even artificial things in violation of nature to nature by a deep insight, disposes very easily of the most disagreeable facts. Readers of poetry see the factory village and the railway, and fancy that the poetry of the landscape is broken up by these. For these works of art are not yet consecrated in their reading, but the poet sees them full within the great order, not less than the beehive, or despite its geometrical web. Nature adopts them very fast into her vital circles, and the gliding train of cars she loves like her own, besides an ascended mind. It signifies nothing how many mechanical inventions you exhibit, though you add millions, and never so surprising. The fact of mechanics has not gained a grain's weight. The spiritual fact remains unalterable by many or by few particulars, as no mountain is of any appreciable height to break the curve of the sphere. A shrewd country boy goes to the city for the first time, and the complacent citizen is not satisfied with his little wonder. It is not that he does not see all the fine houses, and know that he never saw such before, but he disposes of them as easily as the poet finds place for the railroad. The chief value of the new fact is to enhance the great and constant fact of life, which can dwarf any and every circumstance. I'm just going to repeat that. The chief value of the new fact is to enhance the great and constant fact of life, which can dwarf any and every circumstance, and to which the belt of wampum and the commerce of America are like. The world being thus put under the mind for verb and noun, the poet is he who can articulate it. For though life is great and fascinates and absorbs, and though all men are intelligent of the symbols to which it is named, yet they cannot originally use them. We are symbols and habit symbols. Workmen work in tools, words and things, birth and death. All are emblems, but we sympathize with the symbols, and being infatuated with economical uses of things, we do not know that they are thoughts. The poet, by any ulterior intellectual perception, gives them a power which makes their old use forgotten, and puts eyes and a tongue to every dumb and inanimate object. He perceives the independence of the thought on the symbol, the stability of the thought, the accidency and fugacity of the symbol, as the eyes of Linnaeus were said to see through the earth. So the poet turns the world to glass and shows all things in the right series and procession. Through that better perception, he stands one step nearer to things and sees the flowing of metamorphosis, perceives that thought is multiform, that within the form of every creature is a force impelling it to ascend into a higher form, and following with his eyes the life uses the forms which express that life, and so his speech flows with the flowing of nature. All the facts of the animal economy, sex, nutriment, gestation, birth, growth, are symbols of the passage of the world into the soul of man to suffer. They are a change and reappear, a new and high fact. He uses forms according to the life and not according to the form. This is true science. The poet alone knows astronomy, chemistry, vegetation, and animation, for he does not stop at these facts, but employs them as science. He knows why the plain or meadow of space was strewn with these flowers we call suns and moons and stars, why the great deep is adorned with animals, with men and gods, for in every word he speaks, he rides on them as the horses of thought. I'm going to end over here. We are currently on page 329. I'm going to end here. Please be so kind as to leave your feedback, your thoughts, your insights. Leave a message down below and press the like or dislike button down below if that's your preference. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If you subscribe, this amazing video, this audiobook goes out further. These are great insights from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's an amazing philosopher who lived in the 19th century, and most of his a large portion of the self-help books out there, the authors have taken their insights from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Please let me know what you think of the book, the ideas I share through my reading. I want to hear from you. I look forward to seeing your amazing comments. You are important. You're a beacon of light and hope in the world. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I just want to let you know that you are beautiful. I love you. Have a lovely day.